welcome to another FACEHAMMER Advent video, and we're going to talk about
Welcome.
basing.
Yeah, we are. We're going to jump into basically what are my kind of
Basically.
what are my lazy bases and my fancy bases, but the go-to ways that I go about my basing. I think probably all of us have used an aspect of all of these ways. So let's start with the kind of the most complex and then go to the most efficient and then finish on all of them jumbled up in a big heap, because that's as ever, like the middle ground, I think is the best approach. So Russ, could you bring up a picture of some Byron TM basing under a ghost or something like that?
Okay, cool.
All right.
I'm glad you said under a ghost, otherwise I wouldn't know which one you want me to put up.
That's fine. Yeah. Slate mate. Big bits of slate. So this is the way that I go about making a kind of presentation army base. And the really important parts of this are there is a green stuff rim that I push in place. It's all done with a thumb. It's all very, very rough, apart from cutting around the edge, which I do with an X-Acto blade. And what you get there is a raised lip, which is just, you get to paint it black, and it looks super crisp and super neat. And I combine that with putting slate on. The nice thing about using green stuff is the green stuff it's got a grippiness to it. So if you want stuff to stick up at a weird angle, you want to like a stick coming out of it, you want to jam mushrooms in, any of that type of stuff, it will hold on to it, and it's tacky enough to hold it at an angle. You can pin through it super easily. It bounces, and if you're in a rush, it dries even under layers of other stuff, which is actually relevant. So if you're looking to bash out some high-level bases fairly quick, you can work on green stuff as long as you don't press it too hard. You can paint a base before the green stuff is even dried, which is somewhat useful. So that is, it's done in 3 stages. I do kind of a middle raised plinth, which will get a stone or a detail coming out of it. Then I do the rim. Then I let that kind of semi-cure, cut around it, and then I even out the gaps of green stuff, and I put sand on it, which is a kind of a pretty involved process. They end up bottom heavy. That's a real plus for me. Like the miniatures will not ever fall over, because 90% of their weight is in like the first centimeter out of 4 of it.
Particularly with Nighthaunt.
Dude, yeah, right? Like Nighthaunt. Anyone who has played Nighthaunt knows that. Any kind of jumpy, leapy, like modern-y GW models, even witch elves, stuff like that, anyone with a banner, they will not fall over, and they'll probably actually stand on like 45 degrees on hills. It's really, really useful. I go as far as putting a 2p or a 1p or kind of a weighting piece under the base as well, and you end up with it so bottom heavy that it'll just do whatever you need to.
Your Lariel always sort of baffled me, because you pick it up and you can't pick it up from the model because the base is so heavy. You have to pick it up almost from the base.
Yeah, so my Carmine Dragon, that's a really extreme example. That's literally filled with 2Ps, and that can stand at 45 degrees. It defies gravity pretty much. It's really, really practical. I love the style of that basing. That's been used a lot by me over the years. It does take quite a while though, and I started doing that before really texture paints, which we'll kind of move on to, had taken effect. So the basis of that is green stuff. That's got a price to it as well, which is worth considering. Buy it in bulk. I use it from Element in the tubs. Moving swiftly on to the next kind of old method, which is cork. If you could pop that up for us, which will be it'll be covered in texture paint. You can use cork for its finish. I think all of us have probably done that at some point as well. Generally speaking, I'm talking about cork tiles. You get them in like 12-inch thicknesses, or you can buy them from hobby companies now, depending where you've got it. If you get it from a hobby company, as in hobby for this industry, perfect for us. Thank you very much. If you get it in hobby for this industry, the top and bottom of it will be the same. If you've got a DIY tile, it might have a kind of a smoothed, finished edge. I always put that down because it's trouble. So that is to be the underside of your base, unless for some reason you want it smooth.
I've used it both ways. That's why I always get those, because like when I was doing, if I want it to look like concrete slabs, I'll put it the smooth side up, and then I can drill into it for bullet holes, or I can put a little bit of texture on top of it if I want to put some GW texture paint.
You might be able to get away with it marbling les style actually.
Yeah.
You could possibly do it. You'd have to. I think one of the finishes with marble, which is why I'm sort of like fell out of love with my marble bases, is that you need to make sure that you've got like a really solid, like hard coat varnish over the top before you start doing the marbling effects. Because otherwise, when you do the baby wipe technique, you then gets stuck. Like you then pull all like little lints and bits of like fur from the baby wipe. So you need to make sure you could probably do it and have it as a as a base, and then just get your Valio, your polyurethane gloss varnish, do that one, or do your hard coat and just make sure that it's nice and like you've got a solid finish before you then put the marble and stuff over it. But yeah, I think it could work definitely.
Yeah, so there's different uses, probably more 40k applications, I guess, using the shiny side of it. Generally speaking, though, a couple of top tips. If you're looking to do stage layers of cork, which I've done for some character models and stuff like that, the way to do that, and it's such a lovely material to work with. Your hat is lovely, Russ. I know you're having fun. So I rip the top part of it first, and then I turn that upside down. I put it on the cork that I've got, and I rip against that. And you can do that 2 or 3 times, add in the layers, put it on, ripping against it. And you can do it to get kind of like a contour map effect where you go up to your champion's feet. That's great. It's lovely to work with. You can pin through it. Downsides, and there is a big one, Les has already touched on the way to deal with it, is it's soft. What makes it so nice to work with is the fact that it's soft and pliable and organic, and what makes it bad for kind of long enduring gaming, lovely Russell, is that those edges can knock off. So I varnish the hell out of it. Like I will do 3 stages of monitor and varnish from a cam, and then I'll like texture paint on top of it or sand on paint of it and then varnish it again, and that really, really helps the life expectancy of it. So
and it stops it sucking up the paint, because like like it's like, I'm sure I'm not the only person that's found this. I get so frustrated when I'm undercoating, because I'll undercoat the model and the model will be done and it's usually attached to a base, and I'll look at it and I'll go, that base isn't actually undercoated, because like you could see loads of bits showing through still. It just sucks up like paint like you wouldn't believe. So I tend to, as a rule, I do the GW, or I don't buy GW black. I get it from car sort of like car spray paint, because it's essentially the same thing. It's like just a primer, and then I'll bring it in and just airbrush like a Baden black or the Valio polyurethane. Or the, what's the one that's like in the tub,
the actual
like this?
the
like
actual
stuff.
The surface
That
primer.
stuff.
I've got one of those too.
Yeah, just because I think then it adds like that satiny finish to it, and it allows you to get into those recessed parts of the cork bases. Because personally, like, and I've got some on my Stormcast, there's nothing that like annoys me more than seeing a really nice cork base and then you just see cork showing through.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit grim. You can use a big fat Y brush or a stipple brush and like wetter paint and then go over it. If you put a bit of ink in there, that's an amazing top tip as well. Black ink, black paint. Little bit of water, go around and scooch it, and especially if you're batch producing, it doesn't matter that it's quite a wet mix, because by the time you get to the end of the row, the first one's probably dried. So they're the go-to building up materials I use. There are other ones out there, kind of poly fillers, other thicker usable texture paints from Vallejo, stuff like that, sandy paste, things along those lines.
Pumicey stuff they've got, haven't they? The white pumice and the black pumice and stuff, haven't they?
Yeah,
so,
they're pretty solid, those ones. They're hyper textured, really, really nice. If you put any of those on top of naked cork, and you can use this to your advantage because of what Les has mentioned, it will suck away moisture super fast. What that will do is that will encourage bigger cracks in a Grell and Earth or other crackle paints. So working on a porous surface pulls that moisture away super quick, and particularly if you're using old, slightly dry texture paint anyway, which I try and do on purpose because it allows you to put thicker layers. You can use the thick layers plus the porous surface, and that'll give you like big, unsubtle cracks, which I think looks amazing, and I prefer for painting. They are more fragile, so again, once that's done, monitor and varnish like as many times, literally like you could do it 4 times thin, and you could do it 10 if you wanted. I will probably, on average, 3 or 4 times is how many times I'll hit bases if I'm worried about them, because it's so efficient. You just line them all up, front and back, let it dry, front and back, do that a few times. So they're the kind of the go-to ways to build up volume. And then finishing wise, I'm going to cover texture paint in its own section. So Russ, if you've got the base of the Giant up or something like that, that is a combo. So that's a combo. We've got cork there, we've put texture paint on top, we've put texture paint on the bottom, and it just gives you 2 aspects, and both of those are savagely quick, like really, really, really efficient. The time that base took in total, it, like, obviously drying time's a thing, I'm not going to include that. Let's pretend that we're organizing our time really well, or batch producing or something like that. That is about as fast as you can get a high quality base, in my opinion. Like it's dry brush ready. Once you've base coated that, you've got like 20 minutes in tufts. We'll cover finishing stuff at the end, but 20 minutes in tufts and you can make something that looks absolutely brilliant. Texture paints in general, if you pop to the 4 models in a row, Russ, with the different bases, you can finish these however you want. I mean, we've all covered these different ways, but what I want to kind of stress is you've got the colors that they come there. You don't have to use those. Generally speaking, whatever I do, it gets coated black, and then I just turn it into whatever color I like. So it doesn't matter which of these I start with. There's Martian Iron Earth, you've got Agrellan Earth, you've got Agrellan Badland, which has a bit of sand in it. I actually really like that one. I've not used it as much as I should have. I've come around to
Iron Crust as well, which is the red version. So they've all got an equivalent.
Perfect. And you can munge those together. It looks really good. You can have kind of dot around one, dot around the other, push them towards each other. Keep them thick if you want bigger cracks, and varnish the hell out of them once they're done. They're the 2 biggest tips.
Do you want me to show the video of you doing the...
Yeah, go for it. So this just shows how it cracks out. For anyone who hasn't used texture paint, which I imagine isn't many people, but if you put it on thick, the size of the cracks really does change. Those tiny cracks you see around the edge, they're not bad or good. I prefer larger visually. I think you get more kind of visual impact if you've got larger sections, deeper cracks.
Do you just do the Minotaur varnish and then apply the texture paint, or do you do the? I've heard people use PVA glue, so like paste PVA glue over it and then apply the crackle paint. I think it does the same thing essentially, but like I just wondered which one you went for.
So on top of cork, you can just go absolutely naked. That's fine because of it being porous, like we covered. If you're going to put it on top of a naked base, I tend to hit that with something first, whether it is Monutorum varnish, a matte varnish, spray varnish, a PVA, anything like that. It will go better over non-plastic, and it's less likely to flake off. That's probably the biggest single bonus of putting something on top of it.
Because the plastic bases are textured, aren't they? And it doesn't really behave that well on that. I'll go straight onto a base.
And
they're shiny too, just falls off very easily.
And also, like, top tip, if you're going to use the Agrellan Badland as your base color and you're going to just dry brush over that, think about making sure that the base is a color underneath it. So if you're going to do Agrellan Badland, make sure you paint the base a dark brown before you put that over the top, or a color that you want shining through, because otherwise you're just going to have a black base showing through, and then you have to like repaint it in and wash it in.
That's the same as the lava, isn't it, with the modern earth? So if you want to paint that reddy orange and then put that straight over the top. But
it just works.
Yeah.
Consider it before you start applying it, because there's nothing worse than trying to paint in afterwards. Yeah. Byron did that, didn't you, on your Star Wars tank video?
Yeah.
Was it the tank video on? Yeah. All right, super.
Yeah, any of those.
Link in the description would be useful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got quite a few covering texture paints. Really, really like using them. I think they're amazing. So that's kind of the different attributes you can see in that picture. I've got 4 different colors there. Most of those are literally 4 steps. One of them is 3 steps. So it'll be, I'll make it one color, whether that is white for the icy one, or red, or brown, or like deep blue, or whatever. Like dry brush for highlight, optional wash, dry brush for final highlight, done. That's it. They are easy to paint without a model on, particularly if you've got a super flat base. I would really recommend batch producing these. If you've got models you can pull out and clip in, amazing. It's a doddle. Kind of top finishing tips that really do make a difference. Taking some of your base and wiping it up the bottom, like just the feet up to the ankles of your model, that really helps ground your model in that environment. I never stop banging on about that, but it's amazing the difference that makes, because it just sets a narrative for kind of the piece, the model as a whole. But across an army, it makes a really big difference. And it is kind of, I think visually it's regarded as a slightly fancy technique. It's not. It just works. So it's really, really worth doing that. You can do that by watering down your paint and just washing it over there, using washes, dry brushing, anything. It doesn't really matter. You've got tufts for finishing, skulls, whatever it is, candles, mushrooms, all the amazing things that are available now, whether 3D printed, resin, GW, indie, all that stuff. My current kind of balance between efficiency and top result is to use green stuff for their edges and to make just random blobs. That really does add a lot, and obviously if they stick up, I'll get dry brush more and stuff like that. And then use a mix of texture paints. You can throw cork in there if you want, and that is like the hyper efficient way. So even if you're just doing flat bases, you don't want to do the raised rims, anything like that. Like just thumb down a bit of green stuff onto it, smooth it out over the edges, and then spray the lot to make sure that you don't get the adverse effects that Les has listed. Mix your texture paints on top, dry brush that, add a couple of tufts. That is really quick. And across an army, you're literally talking about like, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes per base. And what you get for that on a good army is absolutely amazing. A solid army with bad basing is a bad army, and a bad army with solid basing is a solid army. So there's a massive kind of completely skewed benefit to spending a little bit more time on the basing.
I always do that when I'm doing my like dry brush quick to table stuff. The base is always a little bit more, probably more involved than the model in some cases. Quite enjoy doing basing. I think it's a really, really important tool, just to make an army look themed or more fancy than it actually is. Like I always do. I mean, most of my sort of table armies are cork and tufts with like flowers in, and textured paint mixture of that, and then the tufts will be colours that complement the model scheme, and it's just very simplistic, but it looks good. And then you just put the odd skull if you want to take it up to another level. So
forgiving as well. I think it's really hard to make mistakes. Don't try and fix mistakes on bases. Just cover them with the next step. That's another amazing tip. If you're someone who doesn't like to see them and likes to go back and fix stuff, if you can just bite your lip, or even if you're someone who makes loads of mistakes, either way it works fine. The next step, just cover it over. Like if you didn't make a bit of the base nicely, put really thick texture paint there. If your texture paint went wrong on a bit, put a tuft there. If you did a smeary dry brush, put a tuft there. If you're going to do a wash and you did bad dry brushing, put the wash heavier there. All that type of stuff is really like, it's up to you how to use it, and you don't need to worry about it. And I've learned a lot from dry brushing bases that I've then applied to models.
One of the things I like to do with a base as well is to have a dark in the middle out to lighter in the edge, because if the model stood over it, it's almost like a natural shadow. So you're almost like you're actually like painting a shadow. So like when I do cork, I normally do like a wash in the middle of the cork, and then I'll feather it out at the edges. It's almost like a blend, but it's a very messy one because it doesn't need to be neat.
It's kind of how I did on my Stormcast as well. They've got like the darker center and then going out to the edges of the grey, where I applied texture paint to the top of the cork as well. Looking at it, it just works, I think, and it allows you to do different things. Like I know my Stormcasts were like a bit weird at the first because they were red dirt, like like that sanguine red base and sort of like bluey grey. It just made it look a bit different, and I think you don't have to always. You can make these things look alien by adding different tufts and stuff to it to make it look different.
Yeah, washes as well, especially if you're using one of the sandy texture paints. Washes on those is absolute cheating. I'll link a lovely little tutorial for getting the most out of texture paints with some washes that I've used myself in the past and have followed and really like the effect of. Brighter colours than normal, bit of dry brushing, some washes, you can get away with absolute murder.
And I think if you're doing an army and you're not sure about how to base it, a really good tip is if you've got like a model for the army painted, what you can do is have a pin in its foot, paint 10 bases of different colours and textures, and then just pin him onto each base. And if you want to see what it looks like over a unit, take a photo, and then in Photoshop even in Paint, just crop the model and just copy and paste it 10 times onto the screen and have a look at it.
That's a great idea.
So like you can see a unit of guys in that basing scheme and think, how does that look? Do I like it or not? Before you start doing the entire army's bases. And then get to the end of it and go, oh, it doesn't quite work and I wish I could change it. And then you just wasted all that time and effort. It's the same as doing a test model, but you're doing a test base.
Yeah, which is hopefully it leads us to another show that we're going to, another one of these advent calendar shows that you'll either see before or after this, where I talk about how I plan my base, plan the entire army section. So with Paint, like, using Photoshop and photocopiers and stuff. So
yeah, I think it's a really good bit of advice is to plan your, particularly when you're doing armies, is to plan your scheme. But like one of the best ways to see how a base will look is to have a model on it So if you just paint a base, it's very hard to imagine how that interacts with the color scheme.
Yeah, exactly. And you can stand that model on painted in 3 colors that are just base coats, and you're still going to get an idea of how that works. You could have like a guy who's purple with a green weapon and he's got a base coated silver shield, and you're still going to get a really solid impression of like, okay, well that kind of green wash on the base actually works really well with him because it complements or whatever.
Yep. Okay, cool. So that's it. That's it then. So thanks for watching. If you like it, and subscribe and all that, and check out the links below for the videos mentioned. And if you want any of your basing supplies, you can head over to Element Games through the affiliate link. Would be very helpful. So we appreciate the support.
Absolutely. And do feel free to get your texture paints, open them on the first day, keep an eye on them, but leave them with the lids off for an amount of hours while you're painting, because thicker paints work way, way, way better.
That's for the crackle paint.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thanks for watching. I'm back tomorrow.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Cheers.
See you tomorrow.